A single arrow, loosed in the chaos of battle, found its way into a king's eye. And with that one shot, the fate of England, its crown, its people, and its destiny was forever changed. This is the story of the Battle of Hastings, 1066, the day that knights, betrayal, and blood reshaped medieval Europe. A single crown, 3 rival kings, and a kingdom standing on the edge of chaos. The year was 1066. England was a land both proud and fractured, still feeling the weight of its Viking past, yet reaching toward the promise of a united kingdom. Its green fields, wooden halls, and sacred monasteries stretched from Wessex in the south to Northumbria in the north. But beneath the rolling hills and church bells, a storm was brewing, one that would decide the very soul of the realm. At the heart of this storm stood a dying king, Edward, the Confessor. For 24 years, Edward had ruled England. Pious, gentle, more monk than monarch, he left behind no heir. And in a world where succession was everything, his silence was a spark in a powder keg. As Edward lay on his deathbed in January 1066, whispers filled the halls of Westminster. Who would inherit the crown? There was Harold Godwinson, the powerful Earl of Wessex, the most influential noble in England, commander of armies, and brother-in-law to the king. Edward, some claimed, had whispered Harold's name with his final breath. But far across the Channel, in Normandy, a fierce and ambitious duke was sharpening his claim, William of Normandy. To him, Edward's throne was not Harold's to take. Years earlier, Edward had supposedly promised William the crown, and even Harold, after a shipwreck that stranded him in Normandy, had sworn a sacred oath upon holy relics to support William's right. And yet, there was a third claimant, Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, last great Viking warrior king. To him, England was part of an ancient promise, one made between Viking rulers generations past. The aging warlord, hardened by decades of conquest, was determined to claim it with steel. 3 men, 3 claims, 1 throne. England was about to be caught in a storm of blood. On January 6, 1066, the day after Edward's death, Harold Godwinson was crowned king in Westminster Abbey. The Anglo-Saxon nobles stood by him, beating their shields and pledging loyalty. To many in England, it was the natural choice. Harold was strong, English-born, and a proven leader in war. But in Normandy, when the news reached William, his fury knew no bounds. He raged, he struck his fists against the walls, he swore before God and men. Harold was a perjurer, an oath breaker. William would have his crown. Messengers flew across Normandy. Priests thundered from pulpits. And to William's surprise, Pope Alexander II gave his blessing, sending a consecrated banner to fly over his army. To William, this was not conquest, but holy war. Yet before William could sail, another storm broke from the north. In September, Harold Hardrada, the thunder of the Vikings, arrived with a fleet of over 300 ships, carrying warriors from Norway and beyond. They carved through the coast, capturing towns, burning villages, until they reached York. King Harold, Godwinson, had no choice. He gathered his fired, England's citizen army, and marched north. The clash came at Stamford Bridge, September 25, 1066. It was a battle straight out of the sagas. Hardrada's warriors formed a shield wall, unbreakable, their axes gleaming in the autumn sun. One Norwegian warrior held a bridge single-handedly, cutting down dozens of Englishmen until he was finally felled by a spear from beneath. For hours the field was drenched in blood. And then at last, both Harald Hardrada and Harold's own treacherous brother Tostig lay dead among the slain. Victory, but it was a bitter one. The Norse fleet of 300 ships sailed home with barely 24. Harold Godwinson had crushed the last Viking invasion of England, but his army was exhausted. His men were bloodied, his horses spent. And even as the smoke cleared in the north, news came like a thunderclap. William had landed. On September 28, 1066, William's fleet crossed the English Channel, landing at Pevensey Bay. The Duke of Normandy had risked everything. His ships, his knights, his very title, all gambled on one battle. His army was unlike anything England had ever seen. Norman knights, armored in chainmail, wielding lances from horseback. Breton archers, their arrows darkening the skies. Mercenaries and allies from across France, eager for land and loot. William's men fortified their camp near Hastings, building a wooden castle on a hill. He knew Harold would come. The crown would not come easily. It had to be taken with blood. But Harold Godwinson did not hesitate. Having marched his men over 180 miles to defeat the Norwegians, he now turned them south again, racing to face William. Day and night his soldiers marched, their feet blistered, their shields heavy, and their wounds still raw. The Anglo-Saxon fire was brave, but weary. Yet Harold's determination was iron. He would not let a foreign duke sit on Edward's throne. By October 13th, Harold's army reached the ridgeline near Hastings. His men dug in at Senlac Hill, forming their legendary shield wall. Behind wooden shields and axes, they prepared to repel the invaders. And so it was that at the dawn of October 14th, 1066, two kings faced one another across the battlefield. On one side, Harold Godwinson, last great Anglo-Saxon king of England, weary but unbroken. On the other, William of Normandy, fierce, cunning, and burning with ambition. The fate of England stood on a knife's edge. The sun rises on Hastings, and by its setting, England will never be the same. The morning of October 14th, 1066, was cold, clear, and tense. On the high ridge of Senlac Hill, Harold Godwinson men stood shoulder to shoulder, shields locked, axes ready. They had chosen their ground well. The steep incline gave them strength, forcing William's men to fight uphill. It was the classic Anglo-Saxon shield wall, a living fortress of wood, iron, and flesh. Farmers, housecarls, nobles, alike, all bound in common cause. Many were weary from weeks of war, but behind those shields their hearts beat with defiance. This was their land, their fields, their families. Across the valley below, the banners of Normandy snapped in the wind. William had drawn up his forces with precision, archers in the front, infantry behind them, and the cavalry, the pride of Normandy, waiting in reserve. The two armies, one rooted in ancient Anglo-Saxon tradition, and the other the spearhead of Europe's new knightly warfare, faced each other in grim silence. The fate of England hanging on the balance. The silence broke with the sharp twang of bowstrings. Arrows hissed into the sky, blackening the morning sky. They arced high, falling like rain upon the whole shield wall. Thud, crack. Shields shuddered. Men grunted, ducked, and cursed. But the wall held. The Anglo-Saxons braced tight, lifted shields above their heads where needed, the formation absorbing the storm. Then came the clash of infantry. Norman foot soldiers stormed the slope, shouting Norman war cries. Steel rang against wood. Axes swung down, biting into helmets. Spears jabbed, shields splintered. The English wall shook, but did not break. The first wave recoiled down the hill, bloodied and gasping. The English cheered, beating their shields, their defiance echoing through the valley. Then William gave the order. The knights of Normandy surged forward. Heavy horses thundered up the hill, lances lowered. The earth trembled with their charge. It was a fearsome sight. Armored men on armored beasts, the cutting edge of medieval warfare. But the English stood firm. Shield wall, their
Captains cried. As the cavalry smashed into the wall of wood and flesh, the hill shook with the impact. Horses reared, riders toppled, and Norman knights were cut down by Anglo-Saxon axes. The cavalry retreated in disorder. Some fled further, rumors spreading through the Norman ranks. William is dead! Panic rippled through the Norman host. Defeat loomed. But then William himself appeared. Pulling back his helmet so all could see his face, he shouted, "Look at me! I live! By God's will, I will not fall this day." His presence rallied his men. The tide of panic turned to renewed fury. Hours passed. The battle raged without break. The English shield wall, though battered, stood strong. But the Normans were adapting. William ordered feigned retreats, cavalry pretending to flee, luring pockets of English fighters downhill. Hungry for victory, some Anglo-Saxons broke formation to chase them. It was a fatal mistake. Norman horsemen wheeled around, encircling and cutting down the scattered pursuers. Bit by bit, cracks appeared in the once impenetrable wall. Then came the arrows again. This time, William ordered his archers to shoot high, loosing volleys in steep arcs. The shafts rained down over the shields, striking from above. And it was then, perhaps by chance, perhaps fate, that a single arrow pierced through the chaos, finding its mark. Harold Godwinson, King of England, struck in the eye. Accounts differ. Some say Harold fell to an arrow, others claim Norman knights cut him down in the melee, but what is certain is this. As Harold collapsed, the shield wall wavered. His brothers, Gareth and Leofwine, also fell fighting at his side. The Anglo-Saxon army, leaderless, began to crumble. The Normans pressed the attack with savage fury. Cavalry smashed through gaps, archers poured in volleys, infantry surged. The once mighty wall of shields splintered into fragments. Men fled into the woods, pursued by knights. Others fought to the death, axes red with blood. But the tide could not be turned. By the time the sun set, the field was a graveyard. Thousands of Englishmen lay dead, their king among them. William stood victorious. That night, the Normans camped on English soil, not as raiders, but as conquerors. In the weeks to come, William marched on London. The city, seeing no hope of resistance, surrendered. On Christmas Day, 1066, William of Normandy was crowned King of England in Westminster Abbey. The bells rang, but beneath their chimes, the smoke of Hastings still lingered. The Norman conquest had begun. England would never be the same again. The old Anglo-Saxon order was broken. Castles rose across the land. French words seeped into English speech. A new aristocracy bound to William replaced the old. The world of the shield wall was gone, replaced by the age of knights. And yet, even in defeat, the memory of Harold and his warriors endured, a testament to courage against impossible odds.
The Battle of Hastings was more than a clash of armies. It was the collision of two worlds, the old Anglo-Saxon way of shield walls and spears against the new age of cavalry, castles, and centralized power. It was also the birth of modern England. From William's conquest came centuries of transformation, new laws, new rulers, new culture, but also resistance, rebellions, and the long struggle for identity. And it all turned, perhaps on the flight of a single arrow, a single day, a single battle, a single arrow, and the destiny of a kingdom was forever changed.